In my country, army painter suffers from a really bad image. A lot of people said that they tested army painter at the beginning of their painting journey, and it was horrible. But now, Army Painter updated their formula and released the phonetic range. Many people don't want to give them a second chance. But I do. Let's see if Army Painter can rise from the ashes. I tested the range on my Isengard army for middle strategy battle game, and even if I didn't know at the start, it was a great choice. But more on that later. I used them with an airbrush, brushes with dry brush technique and some blends to test the range in multiple ways. So let's check the product and the promises before painting. In my opinion, Army Painter is a great brand for beginners, and they confirm it with two important points. First, their pots all have mixing bowls in them, which make the shaking easier. Second, the hexad. Yes, I know it's called flexible triad, but they went deeper with the idea. There are 6 colors in each triad system instead of 3. That's why I call it an hexad. Triad, 3 paints, hexad, 6 paints. Another promise is that you can use only 3 paints in this hexad to base and highlight what you want, and you should get a good result. It's true for some and not for others. These two things combined are really good for beginners. This range promises a really good coverage and an insane control. We're going to check this. And the promise about the best paint in the world? Do I really need to explain that every brand are the best in their own way? I don't think so. I made an entire video about these points if you want to hear more. Just right here. So, we have a good product for beginners. Acrylic paints in a drop bottle with mixing bowls? Cool! Let's see what's in the pots. The first paint I tried was the metallics, and honestly, I think they're good. I tested the metals with the dry brush technique and it worked really well. The coverage is good, the shiny pigments are really good too, and as a base coat, it also works really well. For the matte acrylic paints, I wanted to test the triad system and started with dark tone. During my test, I found out that the promise of a great coverage is mostly true on the darkest tones, and not so true on the lightest tones. But in fact, it's quite smart. We usually start with dark tone to then highlight it. Even more so with a range that has an hexad system. And I guess that people who want to start with a lighter tone will often have an airbrush, with which the coverage of the paint doesn't matter. So it's quite a smart move. So the paints are a little bit thick when applied. Sometimes I wondered if the paint was going to dry thinner or if I ruined my painting area. Surprisingly, it dried thinner. But I didn't try my luck too much and diluted the paint most of the time. Also because it's how I usually paint. One thing I found really interesting with the thickness of the paint is that you can do multiple things with the same range. For dry brushing, for example, the paint has the perfect consistency. But if you want to paint at a higher level with smooth blends, you can dilute the paint to do so. I think that's a great idea and that it can help beginners to move forward with the same range. Let's talk about the tint of the range. I have a feeling that this range is less saturated than other brands. I have a similar feeling with the AK range. Obviously, it's not true for the entire range. Paints like the pure red are really saturated, but all the browns, skin tones, grays and bluish greens are less saturated than other brands I usually use. That's why I said earlier that it was a good thing trying this range on the middle strategy battle game army, because these minis have a more realistic color scheme. Next, we are going to talk about the shades. I like them. The paint is well blended in the pots, so you won't have any white stains after the paint dries. But there is a major issue for people who don't like satin finish, because these have a satin finish. After a shade, your mini will be more satin. It's not gloss, but it's not matte either. Except for this, they are good shades. Not better or worse than any other brands, in my opinion. But it's weird for a paint range that's mostly matte to have satin shades. For the effect paints, I think you should try it yourself. I often see people who don't like the blood for the blood god effect from GW, for example, because of the shiny effect. With Army Painter you have the same effect but matte. Same thing for Disgusting Smile and Nurgle's Rot. It's the same effect but one is way more saturated than the other. Oh, and the Disgusting Smile glow with UV light. The Glow series also glow with UV light, just like the fluorescence range of Vallejo. And the final test was the airbrushing. As the paints are thicker than the brand I'm accustomed to, I struggled the first time I tried it in the airbrush. A lot of clog happened, but it's normal. After a cleaning session and a higher dilution, the paint works really well with the airbrush as other brands do. So to conclude this test, I do think that this paint range is really good, especially for beginners thanks to the Hexad system, the mixing bowls and the amount of color available. 216 different paints are available in this range. It's really huge. So, for beginners who don't want to mix the paint and have a painting range to move forward with, I think that this range could be good for you. But the major issue for a beginner will be to understand quickly the thickness of the paint. Because if you put too much paint on the Mini, the details will be clogged, and you don't want that. And it's usually a beginner's mistake. I recently went on a journey to compare most of the new range of paints from different brands, and I think that a lot of improvements were made by many brands these last few years. So if you already have paints from AK, Vallejo or Too Thin Coats, I guess you don't need to change your brand. As I said in this video, the brand doesn't really matter for painter below a certain level of paint. In fact, all the paints available on the market are really good these days. That's really amazing, it was never as easy and cool to start miniature painting than right now. So go painting, okay?
You are so French.
You can find the entire painting range of Army Painter on the new channel's partner, MyHobbyPlace. It's an affiliate link, it's a way for you to support me without any additional cost for you. For me, personally, I like this range of paints, especially the desaturated colors, and we use it for some projects or some special effects. But I still prefer the satin finish of the Too Thin Coats. As I said, it's more about feelings of the paints than anything else. If you want to know why I love the Too Thin Coats range, watch this video.